Hey kids, if you'd like for us to read your story, have your parents email us at thekidventurespodcast@gmail.com. We can't wait to share your imaginative, crazy, and funny stories with all of our kid listeners. Now, let's get this podcast party started. Welcome to the Kid Ventures Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Goss, a homeschool dad and author of middle grade fiction, including the series The Travelers League. I'm passionate about creative writing, and I want to spread that passion to others, especially you kids, through this new podcast where you, the students, the kids, are the stars of the show. So, you ready? Let's go! Each episode, we hear from a young author who answers the question, what is your story? In this episode, we hear from Eva Mae from Spring Hill, Tennessee.
My name's Eva Mae, and I'm 11 years old. The things I like to do in my free time is Simon, Minecraft, and writing. I hope you liked my story today. Thanks for listening to the Kid Ventures Podcast.
Hey moms and dads, do you have a business or website that you think other families should know about? Send me an email at thekidventurespodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to share your website and products with our listeners. Again, that email is thekidventurespodcast@gmail.com. Hey, Nick here, and I'm sitting with my wife, Rihanna, and we have a segment that we call What Are You Reading?, where Rihanna and I discuss some middle grade fiction that we've used in our homeschool reading. Hey, Rihanna.
Hello. I am excited to share this author with you and hope that our listeners won't get too overloaded with British authors because I'm coming to you today with another classic English countryside author named Edith Nesbit.
I don't think I've ever really heard of her.
I hadn't either before I started homeschooling. The Railway Children was the first middle grade fiction by Edith Nesbit that I picked up to read aloud, and I just fell in love with her writing. I think we read Railway Children when Christian was first grade, so this is about 5 years ago that we started reading.
Cool. Tell me about it.
Well, first, I want to talk a little bit about who Edith Nesbit was. She lived between 1858 to 1924 and has been credited with being the first author to make children's fantasy a genre of books.
No kidding.
In fact, C.S. Lewis gave a nod to her in the book Magician's Nephew. In Lewis's book, he references the fictional characters, the Bestible children, that make up Nesbit's series of the Treasure Seekers. And also, C.S. Lewis uses 4 siblings, obviously, as his protagonists, in the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe and all of the Chronicles of Narnia.
Right.
But that, those 4 siblings, as we were reading all of Edith Nesbit's books, I saw that as a theme as well. So in Railway Children, the father of 4 children is off fighting a war. And does that sound familiar?
So far.
We have the Chronicles of Narnia,
Yep.
C.S. Lewis. The children are kind of taken off into the English countryside. And that's what happens in Railway Children. The mother takes her 4 children to an English countryside where she helps provide for the children by writing for a magazine.
Cool.
And then Treasure Seekers is a separate book from Railway Children. But in this series, 6 siblings create their own magazine newspaper to sell and make money in order to help their widowed father recover the family fortune.
That's cool.
It is. So the Treasure Seekers and the Would-Be Goods, there's a series there. And then there's another series that Edith Nesbit wrote that we listened to called 5 Children and It. And in this, a family goes on vacation and the oldest 4 children discover a creature that lives in a gravel pit and grants wishes. So you're definitely kind of falling into that fantasy genre with that book, especially with creatures.
I love how it's the oldest 4 children.
Yes,
of all the children. There's
yes.
Just the top 4.
Well, it's called 5 Children in It.
Oh, okay.
But there is a baby. So,
okay.
So the baby does not go into the gravel pit with the older 4 children.
Okay, gotcha.
And then another book that she wrote is called The Enchanted Castle. All right, so I want you to pay really close attention to the plot in this one.
Okay.
In this story, 4 children discover a magic ring that makes them invisible.
Oh, come on.
And the magic ring and the magic castle, the enchanted castle, there's some parts of the story where magic happens and the statues become animated, and a lot of really fun things like secret doors and all of the typical fantasy genre of castles are in that story.
So the enchanted castle.
Right.
With a ring that makes someone invisible.
Yes.
When was that written?
1907.
So, well, obviously there's another famous ring story by a famous British author, but
we know.
When was that
written? The Hobbit. So The Hobbit was written 1937, 30 years after
30 years
Edith
after.
Nesbit had written the plot of the Enchanted Castle. Yeah.
Whoa, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think our listeners would really enjoy the imagination of Edith Nesbit's books.
I think so too. I wish
I
had
would.
known. Yeah, I did. I mean, I'm an adult, and reading it to my children, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this author. That's why we listen to audiobooks of all of her stories. All of the Bestable Children, the Would-Be Goods, the Treasure Seekers. There's several books in that series, and the 5 Children in It. And so when I was a kid, I would have devoured these for sure.
Cool.
And I think that's what's so wonderful about books, is that there's always good stories out there to discover. I read some encouragement in Sarah Mackenzie's book, Read Aloud Revival. We shouldn't worry too much about having our kids read any specific book list that has to be checked off before they leave our home. So there's no way they can read every good thing out there. But we should just be thankful for the great stories and books we can expose our children to, and know that if we're encouraging a home of readers, they will discover wonderful books on their own, just like you and I have done in our adulthood.
Yeah, well, except for my books. Put those on, make a list. Even if it's just my books, they have to read those books.
Yes, put Nick's books on
But
your
you're right. That is very true. Well, you have schooled me today on the history of Edith Nesbit. I had no idea that she was one of the first children's fantasy authors. She created the genre, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
That's really cool.
And she's an author that you will enjoy if you like fantasy and positive sibling relationships. That's another feature of her writing that I love. All the siblings look out for each other and show compassion toward their younger siblings.
That's cool.
And the younger siblings look up to their older brothers and sisters. So definitely check out our show notes for this podcast, and we'll give you some links and information more about Edith Nesbit.
Very cool. Well, speaking of authors to look out for, I think we need to keep our eye on these student authors that we feature in this podcast. I know some of them will be named someday. We need to keep our eye on as they get older, just like this next story coming up. Stay tuned for our featured story by Eva Mae. Now it's time for our featured story. Kid Ventures Podcast proudly presents The Weasel and Cookies by Eva Mae. This story was dramatized and adapted for your listening pleasure by me, the narrator. Once upon a time, there was a little toddler weasel. Not a weaselly toddler, that would be a rude thing to say. No, he was a weasel of toddler age. And being a weasel, he was a master thief. It's just how God made them. Stealing things is hardwired into their little weasel DNA. And goodness gracious, they just can't help themselves. It's kind of cute, really. Anywho, this weasel, who we'll just call Weasel, since the author didn't name the character, could always steal a cookie from the cookie jar without getting caught by his mom. And Weasel was always down to party in the cookie jar, burglar style, 'cause that's how the weasel do. As Weasel grew up, he could always steal any and everything without getting caught, especially cookies. And he grew into a criminal mastermind. Now, I know what you're thinking. Where were all the police? Well, in Animaltropolis, I forgot to say, they didn't live in the real world like us humans do. In our world, animals, don't steal things. Well, sometimes they do, but they can't talk. And they don't use cookie jars. And they sometimes poop on the rug. But this story is fictional, and in this fictional world, animals are as clever and as technologically advanced as us humans. And this fictional place is called Animaltropolis. Okay, back to the story. The police in Animaltropolis called themselves Animal Patrol, or AP, and they would always try to catch and arrest the Weasel, but he was too sneaky for them. The Animal Patrol, or AP, developed an app for normal citizens to report Weasel activity. It was called the App. The Weasel was just too crafty to be caught, though, so the App was just a big stinking waste of taxpayer dollars. Kind of like traffic roundabouts where perfectly good stop signs will do. Kids, ask your parents about taxes if you want to see their heads explode. Now back to the story. Weasel was planning a huge heist. He'd been planning and plotting this heist his whole toddler life. He was about to do it, but it was difficult. It was the hardest heist in the whole wide world. Weasel was gonna break into the library and steal the Genius Book of World Records. But he would have to go through 5 levels of security to get it. The library was no joke when it came to its security, and the city spent all kinds of taxpayer money on the library's security level. They overspent taxpayer dollars on it. Again, kids, taxpayer money. Ask your parents. Exploding heads. Now, Weasel wanted to get the world record book so he could find the secret login code for the computer, which I think was on page 33. I'm pretty sure. He wanted it so he could hack in through the Genius World Record private website and enter himself as the world record holder for everything listed in the book. He basically wanted to be remembered for having the world record for everything, and I mean everything. Largest wheel of cheese eaten under 3 minutes? That would be Weasel. Loudest burp ever at 300 decibels? Weasel. The most bottle flips without using opposable thumbs? Weasel. Oh look, he did a cappy. World's biggest collection of Chuck E. Cheese coins? You get the idea. The police wouldn't be able to arrest him with all those world records because, you see, in Animaltropolis, the law was you couldn't arrest anyone who had a bunch of world records, and Weasel wanted all of them. So the heist started at 12 a.m., aka midnight. Weasel snuck into the library. He went through all the books on the bookshelves from A through G to find the Genius World Record book. And when he found it, he began to sneak back out of the library. But there were cookies on the librarian's counter. Animal Patrol had cleverly placed them there, hoping to someday trap our heist hero. He almost didn't see them, but there ain't no cookies that can hide from the Weasel. No, don't think about it, Mr. Weasel, he said to himself. I can't eat that cookie. I'm not gonna eat that cookie. I'm not gonna eat that specific, delicious, scrumptious, sinful cookie. Aw, it's peanut butter flavored, he groaned. I can't help it. Yes, Weasel ate the cookie.
Stop in the name of the law,
said the police, who had been hiding under the diaper-changing tables in the kids' area. Oh no, I have to get out of here, said the Weasel. But the library doors were locked from the outside. Oh, peanut brittle. Animal Patrol caught Weasel. They arrested him, and they sent him to court.
Hear ye, the Honorable Judge Cottonmouth presiding.
Let's see here, Mr. Weasel. You've been accused of stealing the Genius World Record book from the library, eh? Caught you red-handed. There's plenty of evidence, and no reason to give you anything less than life in prison.
May I please have a second chance to be good, your most gracious and fair and, dare I say, handsome honor?
Said Weasel, interrupting the judge.
No one ever gave me a second chance.
True,
said the judge.
I am handsome, and second chances are warranted for smart little weasels like yourself who Know a handsome judge when you see one. Fine. But first, we're going to put you on the news, 'cause, well, I like the news. Let's watch it right now.
Good evening and welcome to Animaltropolis Channel 4. I'm your host, Dandy Dan Danderson, and tonight we bring you breaking news. A weasel has just been caught trying to steal the Genius Book of World Records from the city library. He now awaits his sentencing from handsome Judge Cottonmouth. We take you now live to the courtroom.
Fine. I'll give you a second chance, Weasel,
said the judge. Yippee! I believe these belong to you, the weasel said as he handed the handcuffs back to the police. Weasel went home and pondered his mischievous thieving ways, quite sorry for all the stealing he'd done. And, while he decimated a plate of chocolate chip cookies, he resolved to become a police officer someday and use his heist skills to catch other thieves. That way, no one would ever break his record for being the greatest criminal mastermind of all time, and the first police weasel ever in Animaltropolis. So now and forever, he is known as Mr. Weasel, the police officer / cookie burglar. The end. All right, kids, that's it. Can you believe how amazing that story was? Eva Mae really pulled out all the stops. So creative with all the funny dialogue, the great characters, the cute little weasel. Very, very clever. I'm so excited to talk to her. Stick around. We're going to talk to Eva Mae in just a second. Jimmy is a homeschooler. Jimmy loves to tell stories and dreams of being a famous author someday. But poor Jimmy has no idea how to turn his story ideas into an actual book. Don't worry, Jimmy. Nick Goss has a free 6-video series on YouTube called Writing Tips for Kids. Ask your parents' permission to subscribe to the Kidventures YouTube channel. There you will find the Writing Tips for Kids videos that will show you all the steps you need to take your ideas and craft them into a book. You'll learn everything you need to know about creating characters and story structure, and even how to come up with great story ideas. Writing Tips for Kids on the Kidventures YouTube channel.
So we're here with the author of Weasel and Cookies, Eva Mae. Eva Mae, that was an amazing story. How did you come up with that story idea?
Well, it was from a app, or a website too, called Story Starters.
Really? Story Starters? Tell me about that.
It's like a writing website where it gives you a boost of what to write.
Is it like a writing website for kids to help them get story ideas?
Yeah, you can only go from like 1st to 6th grade.
Oh, interesting. Very cool. So tell me about how you came up with the idea for a weasel. Did that Story Starters website give you the idea for the weasel?
Yep.
Wow, cool. So Eva Mae, what was your favorite part of Weasel and Cookies when you were writing it?
My favorite part was when the Animal Patrol was hiding behind the baby's table changing station.
I love that part. That was so cool. And I love how you made the weasel go to court, and then there was the news. Like the judge wanted to watch the news first. That was so fun to do.
Yeah.
Very cool. So is this the first story you've written, or have you written others?
Oh, I started writing when I was 6, on my 7th birthday.
I figured this was not your first rodeo. I knew that you had written other things, I could tell. And I think a lot of people could probably tell too, because your story was so great. What are you working on next?
A book called The Magical Book. It's about a kid who gets sucked into a library book.
Ooh, that sounds awesome. Well, I hope that you'll come up with more story ideas for Kidventures and send them to me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sending it to me. It was amazing. I hope you liked it too. And we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Hey kids, if you're listening and you have a story that you'd like to submit, have an adult go to our Kid Ventures podcast page on my author website at nickgoss.com, or have them send us an email at thekidventurespodcast@gmail.com. I can't wait to read your story. Also, let me tell you about our online community at Patreon, parents. Our VIP members will receive a letter in the mail. Yes, the actual snail mail. We will physically mail you a letter every month from the Kid Ventures podcast team. This printed newsletter will have fun writing tips and prompts for your kids, submissions like poems and pictures from our listeners, and also a note from me, Nick Goss, and the rest of the Kid Ventures podcast team. You can also join us each month for a Zoom call and get early access to new podcast episodes. Check out the show notes for all the information and links. That's it for this episode, kids. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to tell your friends about the podcast and leave us a good review on iTunes. Also, if you're a parent, we'd love it if you check out our Patreon page and join our community. This is Kid Ventures Podcast. See you next time.